Hello, everybody, and welcome to another edition of Fire Up Wisconsin. I am hosting tonight because Mr. Scott Motor City Madmouth is down at Miami Marlins Park. He is talking to Don Mattingly, who is coaching his second to last game at home at Marlins Park. They're going against the Atlanta Braves, so Scott is down in Marlins Park at his last baseball game for the season. So I am in here pinch hitting, you could say, for him. I have two wonderful guys on the broadcast with me tonight. I have beneath me, I have Mr. Eric Katz, Mr. Concrete Dump. How are you, Eric?
Good. How about yourself?
I am good. And then I have next to me Rick Curdy, aka Mr. Opinion. How are you tonight, Rick?
I'm doing well, and I'm wearing my Packer green for you guys.
All right. And I see we have a Brewers jersey in the background. And if Eric stands up a little bit, he could show you his shirt. He's got it's a Badgers shirt. There we go. Perfect. And so fitting for Wisconsin show tonight. So we're gonna lead off, and it's appropriate. We're leading off with the Brewers, as last night they were officially eliminated for the playoffs for the first time in 5 years. We've come to, I mean, I hate to say this, but we've come to expect them in the playoffs. So this is kind of a little bit of a gut punch, I would say. We were expected to do very well this year, and our bats just didn't get the job done, and injuries bit us. So without going into more on that, Rick, talk to us a little bit about the Brewers.
Well, the Brewers are just a hard-nosed, blue-collar team. They play small ball. I love small ball. They have great pitching, but unfortunately their Achilles heel is the offense. They just don't have enough pop in that lineup. They really need to go the offseason and get not one, probably two big bats out there. So, or get somebody out from minor leagues, or do a trade. You know, I don't know if Gallo's gonna stay with the Dodgers. He's a home run hitter. He just strikes out way too much, but I mean, he does have a big pop in his bat. I think he'd be a good fit with Milwaukee. So Milwaukee is a great team. Council is a fantastic manager, great pitching. That's their bread and butter. It's just the offense is just that they're struggling with. So you can get a couple more bats up there. I think they'll be really, really good next season.
Eric, talk to us a little bit about the Brewers, and also talk to us. Do you know who is a free agent this year?
Well, I'm going to rule when we're talking free agency. I'm going to rule out Aaron Judge right away, because there is no way the Brewers will ever sign him to the magnitude of contract there. It's just they do not have that kind of money. But there was a number of issues with the team this year. Number one, their bullpen was not the same, was not as good as it was last year. The offense, well, part of it was Renfroe was out for a good portion of the year, and I don't want another power bat in that lineup. They have it with Willie Adames, as well as Rowdy Tellez and Hunter Renfroe. It's pretty much a home run or nothing offense right now. What they need is a guy who can just hit it anywhere. Kind of like, you don't need him to be that 100 RBI guy. You need a guy who can hit for average, who will get on, and then he will set up the big poppers like Adames and Tellez and Renfroe to get the big home run. This home run or nothing thing has really plagued them this year, and it's a big reason why that they haven't. And also, I'm going to go back to what Rick had said about about the article that was sent about the Josh Hader trade. I'm sorry, I have no sympathy for you there. This is a business. Josh Hader had 2 years of club control left. Yes, he was traded at an inconvenient time, but he had been on the trade block for quite some time. And the Brewers knew they weren't going to extend him. The fact of the matter is they were setting up Devin to be the closer the whole time. He got to close out some games. I mean, he's still got a long way to go as a closer. I will give you that. And when he's out there and he's on, the guy can very easily be a closer. They also had Taylor Rogers, who's proven to be a closer, granted a high ERA, but they were never able to find that role, find who was going to be that guy. They tried Rogers, they tried Williams. They kept on flip-flopping back and forth, which was the big reason why that they didn't go to the playoffs. also, I mean, their starting staff was hurt for a majority of the year. As Freddie Peralta missed a significant amount of time. I know Woodruff missed a month, and at one point they had to get Chichi Gonzalez off waivers just to have a pitcher for the game, and he absolutely got shellacked that game, unsurprisingly. But the fact is, this team still has offensive problems. They need more contact bats. They can't just be a self-reliant team that's going to say, we need the long ball every single time at bat, because it's just not going to happen.
I miss the days of all the singles, and, with the shifting, I know that took away a lot of that because they played the percentages, but I miss the bunts. I miss the singles, the stealing the bases because they're on base and they can steal the base. I tell people that as much as I don't like the 10-inning man on second rule that they had, it did cause them to do a little more stealing and maybe bunting and more of that smaller ball as opposed to hitting for the fences all the time. It's not all or nothing. You can, if you string a bunch of hits together, it's the same thing. It's better than a home run.
I think what you'll see though is we'll see the Brewers go after complete hitters now because the shift is going away. I think it'll help out guys like Joey Gallo, who's just had an awful year this year, and I think those guys, the lefties, will be helped out the most. I think you'll see the Brewers start going after these bats because for the longest time everybody was trying to become a power hitter because of the shift. I think the runner on second rule, that's still, I'm hearing stuff that it's still very much up in the air on what's going to happen with it. We'll see how that goes. I'm hearing it will stay. I'm hearing it will leave. I'm just going to wait and see what happens during the winter. If it's here, great. If it's right now, it's just up in the air right now what happens with that. But the Brewers need complete hitters. They had that when they had Prince. Granted, they didn't have enough pitching back then, but they had it when they had Prince Fielder, J.J. Hardy, Corey Hart. Corey Hart wasn't just a home run hitter. That guy could pop him off the wall too. Even Yelich was a doubles machine at one point. I think
Ryan Braun.
Yes, Ryan Braun. Mm-hmm. Yep. I knew I was forgetting one, but yeah, they had some solid players, including they had some solid players back then. And I think that, you're going to find them finding complete hitters and developing more complete hitters more in their system. I know that I think, their new center fielder, Garrett Mitchell, I think he can be that guy. I think Garrett Mitchell has proven that he belongs and he's ready to take over center field. Mm-hmm. I know that he had a home run tonight and he walked off against the Yankees when I was there. But I think he can be that guy. But again, they can't just be home run or nothing. That's what was plaguing the Brewers all year. Yes, they hit a lot of long balls, but the fact of the matter is you can't just rely on the long ball. And I think Joey Gallo, who I know they can probably get for nothing, because I really doubt Joey Gallo goes back to the Dodgers. I think he's just a rental at this point.
Yeah.
I think he'd be perfect. Small market. The fans aren't as oppressive as the Yankees, which and also to an extent the Dodgers. The Dodgers fans are they can get a little rowdy too. But I think it'd be a perfect market for him. I think he would go back to the success he had with the Rangers, and I think I think Wisconsin would be a great place for him to get comfortable, and he wouldn't have the press breathing down his neck at night in and night out. So there's a thought there for them. But again, they need guys who can hit those screaming doubles and those perfectly placed hits into the outfield, and also guys who are willing to make contact. Throw up a sac fly in there and boom, a run comes across. But, also, it's not just their bats that were the problem this year. I mean, we all like to give the Brewers, crap about the bats, and rightfully so. But their pen, it's overshadowed. Their pen was not as good this year. Yes, they lost Jake Cousins for a majority of the year, and that changed things up. But their pen was no longer that pen that could, you throw in an arm there. He's going to get the job done. I know, yes, Brad Boxberger was, back to being Brad Boxberger and doing what he does best for the most part. And Trevor Gott was a nice surprise, but they don't have those guys like last year who you throw any number of them in there. I know Brent Suter, as much as he's a Suter, I know he's as much of a fan favorite as he is. He kind of regressed this year, and I really believe that that their pen, I think it's worth looking at too, because they just don't. Their pen wasn't what it was, and maybe they figure out whether Devin Williams in a full year is the closer or not, and we'll see what they do with Taylor Rogers, who's proven he can be a closer, and he's closed games before, and he's been a very high leverage closer before. But I don't know. There's a lot of question marks going around with that team. And as far as Craig Counsell goes, he's not going anywhere. Like, why would they? Who else is going to do the job that he did? Who else do you have that you can think of that would be able to lead, that would be able to do what he's done for the amount of years? Heck, during a rebuild year, he nearly led them to the playoffs, and they weren't supposed to go to the playoffs.
Yeah. They would be foolish. They would be foolish because he would get taken right away. Like, like the White Sox and the Angels. Are you kidding me? I think the White Sox will snatch Craig Counsell. He'd be on the market for 5 minutes if someone gave him. He's a great manager. He's an underrated manager. He does a lot more with less that he has. And the Brewers, they just missed the playoffs, but before that, they were going to the playoffs for 5 years. And, they don't, the bullpen needs some help, the offense, and they had a lot of injuries. And I think that was the combination of why they missed the playoffs. And they just missed it. It wasn't like they were like 20 games out. They just missed it. So they're a good ball team. Even
when they got healthy, they had opportunities to pass Philadelphia. They had a 4-game series going against the Marlins. If they just split that series, they're in the playoffs. But they lose 3 out of 4 to the 90-plus loss Marlins, and they didn't get it done. They had opportunities this year to really make some noise and really stay there. They led the division for most of the year up until after the trade deadline. So the team can do it. The potential's there. I know that they did it most of the year without their vaunted starting pitching, especially Freddie Peralta. And Brandon Woodruff and Corbin Burns had some nice encores to some Cy Young worthy years. But, the fact of the matter is they didn't get it done. Whoa, Josh Hader was traded. Well, cut it out with Josh Hader. He's not been a
disaster. Well, he's been a disaster with the Padres. So I think they dodged the bullet there because I think they knew something about him that the Padres didn't know about him. I think they knew he had a tired arm or a dead arm. And when they got rid of him and they knew that his contract was coming up and probably he wasn't going to resign, let's send him out there. And I think they dodged a bullet with him because he has been nothing but an unmitigating disaster for the Padres. But what has to been a disaster for the Padres this year?
I think yes, but he had been hit around a little bit even prior to getting traded. So the Brewers could sense the average fan could sense something was coming there. They could sense that he was going to go into a slump and he was just going to get shellacked night in and night out. I'm not sure but in terms of the Brewers this year, what difference would he have made had he stayed? I don't think he really makes that big of a difference. And I think that team still bows out and doesn't go to the playoffs.
I'm going to say, I don't know if they would have bowed out of the playoffs because they were so close, but I'm saying, I don't think they would have gone far in the playoffs had they made the playoffs. Because they're just, some of the other teams just have too much talent and have had unbelievable years. Let's face it. There are some teams that are lights out this year compared. There's a big gap between some of the really, really good teams and the rest of even the teams that are in the playoffs. So I think, yes, that they might have made the playoffs because they're so close. They're within 2 games. Could he have made the difference in 1 or 2 games? He could have. Do we know? Would he have performed better with the Padres or the Brewers since he was with the Brewers for so long? Did maybe some of his problems become mental problems when he got traded? They could very well have. We won't know the answer to that question. But I think that he might have made the playoffs. But would they have gone far? I do not believe they would have gone far.
With the Brewers being in the smallest market in baseball, with next to Tampa, they got to be with these guys. They got to be sure that this team can go to the World Series and potentially win it. They have to be sure. And it was obvious this year that team was not going to be it. So because of the 2 years of club control they had over Josh Hader, his arbitration price was just going to keep going up and up. And that was going to be that. So, yes, we would have rather seen him get traded in the offseason, I'm sure. And maybe it would have made less of a splash. I don't know. But keep in mind, though, the offensive problems were still there. They were without Renfroe for much of the year. They lost Adames for a month of the season. And, they at one point only had 2 regular starting pitchers in their rotation because of the amount of injuries they had. And, even they spent a lot of time on the IL, their pitching staff has. But the fact of the matter is they figured, well, we can probably get something in return. We can get a lot back in return for Hader, considering how well he's been for that club and how well he's done over the years. Was he a fan favorite? Absolutely. Did he mean a lot to the team? Yeah, but fact of the matter is this is a business. Guys get moved around like they're chess pieces. They should have really got the focus back on knowing, okay, he's no longer here, but we still have a job to do. And yes, they're going to finish up with another winning season, but it's not enough. They had no excuse against the Marlins. Everyone was healthy. Mm-hmm. They had opportunities. They had a 1-0 lead going to the 8th inning. They decided to leave Freddie Peralta out there for too long, and boom, he gives up a grand slam to a walking slump this year in Avisail Garcia, who's a home run or nothing guy.
He used to be a Brewer.
He was a really good Brewer for that matter. But he gives up a grand slam, and they had opportunity the following night. Again, they give it up in extras. Mm-hmm. They take one of the games. Okay, they're back to being a game or a game and a half out.
Woodruff against Sandy. Yes.
Yep, and so they got it done then. But the following night they could have got it done again, and potentially taken Philadelphia. But They let they gave the wild card spot away to Philadelphia. I know the Brewers in the past have been kind of weird with making the playoffs and barely making the wild card, and I thought that was possible now, which they had their opportunities, but they just didn't get it done. I mean, I'm sure Craig will be the first to tell you that we didn't get it done.
Exactly. So, since we're talking about the splash of the Hader trade, let's go to another splash, surprising or maybe not surprising move to another team. We're going to talk Wisconsin Badgers football. And they're surprising, or like I said, maybe not surprising to some of you, move on Sunday, firing head coach Paul Chryst. He was what I would say as of late has been uninspiring to his team. The team has not played with a fire that I have seen in a while. The Badgers are known, let's face it, for their running backs. We're not a Michigan or an Ohio State or an Alabama that gets the best quarterbacks. We've never had great. Don't get me wrong, we've had some good ones, but we're not a quarterback. We're a running back team. And for what started out Braylon Edwards as a Heisman Trophy candidate in the beginning of the year to only get 2 yards rushing this last weekend against Illinois was I did not see the game, so I cannot say exactly how they played. I'll be honest. But 2 yards for any running back in any game, unless you get injured, I don't understand. I just don't understand. Eric, why don't you start with this one?
Well, they played awful. They just turned the ball. Graham Mertz played awful. I mean, I don't know what else to say about that one, especially against their former coach Brett Bielema, who I still think is a jerk. But the thing is, though, was I was just with the timing. I wasn't surprised that it happened. I thought, he's 2-2. The season's not over yet. They could easily, we saw it last year. They start 1-3 and then they go on a tear and win 8 straight and are on the doorstep of going back to the Big Ten championship. But to be truthful, the program was becoming stale. It's becoming, after 2019, I think the beginning of the end happened in 2020, which we can say COVID, we can say this, no full practices, on and off. Yeah, that factored into it, which, I agree. But it was starting to head to that point. 2021, I think, was more the same, except, obviously they ripped off 8 straight wins and, and they were good wins too. But the one thing that struggled was the quarterback. That was Paul Chryst's specialty. Mm-hmm. Of developing QBs. I mean, even in 2020, Graham Mertz struggled. I mean, you can say COVID all you want, but when he did play, it was not good. 2021, I apologize to those out there, but he gave me anxiety every time he touched the football. and I had no idea where it was going to go. For all I knew, it was going to hit Bucky Badger in the head. Mm-hmm. And, again, it's been a little better this year, but not for a 4-star guy who's been who's started for the past couple of years. And I felt as though with this program starting to turn a little stale, I would have rather seen Chris finish out the year, or at the very least given a shot at trying to finish. But, at the same time, though, it was time. He did wonderful things for the school. And no, he did not lose the locker room. If you see social media, players have been nothing but supportive of the guy on the way out. It's complete polar opposite of what the Detroit Lions did to Matt Patricia and what the Louisville Cardinals did to Bobby Petrino on the way out of his second time there. But the players loved him. Fact of the matter is, this is a production business, and it matters how many wins you get. And he wasn't getting it done. It's one thing also to lose to Ohio State. That's justifiable. They're just on another. They're on another stratosphere. Mm-hmm. That happens. That's okay. You're not going to be competing with them this year, especially this year, who they could potentially win it. They could potentially go to the playoff, I think. Mm-hmm. But when you get bedolgened at home against the University of Illinois, no less, your program has some deeper problems there. Yes. And could they have corrected it? Could he have given it a shot to correct it? Yeah, I think so. I wouldn't have been surprised if they did. But also what factors into is his buddy Barry Alvarez is no longer there. Barry loved Paul. Actually, he wanted Paul before he hired Gary, but being the guy that Barry Alvarez is, Chris had only been at because he was waiting to see what Brett Bielema was going to do, and Paul Chryst obviously jumped for the head coaching job at Pitt, and was actually building something kind of nice there. And although he left obviously to come back home, but which nobody can blame him there, right? And the fact is though, Barry's no longer there. It's a new guy in charge. Chris McIntosh has a lot of wants things to change. He's trying to put his stamp on the program. And granted, the guy was a really good offensive lineman and good enough to be drafted in the first round to play in the NFL before he got injured and wasn't the same. But Jim, it was time. I always felt like it was, the cattle call was coming. And, I felt as though that, because Barry Alvarez was there, it wasn't going to happen because Barry was never going to fire Paul. Correct. And I think that, the program was becoming stale and it was kind of starting to get into a hovering pattern. Problem is if we learn anything from Nebraska, never leave your program in a hovering pattern. Otherwise it will nosedive. I know with Bo Pelini, it was, I wouldn't say stale. It was good, but it wasn't like, it wasn't it wasn't up to the delusional fan base's standards, despite not having the product on the field to do it. Okay. But I think giving it to Leonard was the right thing to do. Sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say, before we get into who's replacing him and candidates, let's have Rick talk a little bit about the Paul Chryst firing.
I wasn't surprised. They looked really bad. They got to a slow start. I agree with Eric. I think they've been kind of stale for the last 2 years. Look, Ohio State, they're on another stratosphere. Michigan's getting better, and they're not going to compete with them. They're always they're always known for their defense, and the offense has been good, but it was just time. And now you see a rash of these coaches getting fired. Scott Frost, you saw Herm Edwards. And these buyouts they're getting are unbelievable. So I'm in the wrong line of work. So, but I just think it was time for a new face. You got someone new there. I think he wants to give Leonard an opportunity and a shot. And he might be the head coach there. They might not be going after maybe a Matt Rule or a Matt Campbell or in the offseason. He might see his guy there and say, I want Leonard there. And, Chris just wasn't inspiring them. They just weren't playing they weren't playing Wisconsin football, and they were getting dull. They were getting boring. and it was just time for a new voice. And he just felt it was time to pull the plug. And so I wasn't surprised by that, by the firing at all, to be quite honest with you.
Mm-hmm.
It's not, no, they were still, between the tweets of that team, they still wanted to play hard for Chris. Chris never lost that locker room. It was just, again, their offense was outdated.
Yeah.
And which I know Wisconsin's kind of limited on what they can do because of the high academic standards of that school. You can't be a dummy to get into that school. And I had no chance of getting in there whatsoever. And they, but with them, they still wanted to play for the guy. Everybody on that team loved Paul Chryst and everything he did and everything he's done for that university, both as a player, and a coach and a head coach multiple times over. He spent a lot of time over there. And Herm Edwards, that's a completely different story. That school is in so much hot water. They have no idea what to do. This was just a matter of the program starting to get into a hover pattern, and they don't want it to become like Nebraska, where once great now has fallen into the trash.
Yeah.
But there's a certain type of athlete that you can recruit at the University of Wisconsin. It's not like Florida where you can recruit all the skill positions in the world, forget the offensive line, and these guys can run around it. No, this place, I would strongly encourage you to come fly out here during the winter. I really would. You can get out of that North Carolina heat for a bit and come outside and make a snowman.
Sure.
But yeah, it is that team is built, that university is built on built on offensive linemen and running backs. That's what you're going to get in this state. The state sorry, go ahead. That state churns these guys out. Braylon Allen, he's from Fond du Lac. The guy was going to be, they had no idea what they were going to do with him. But, he running back, offensive, there was, Joe Thomas, for example, was probably in my mind, the greatest Wisconsin Badger to ever play at the university.
I don't know. I challenge you because maybe J.J. Watt.
He didn't start at Wisconsin though. He played at Central Michigan first. Then he walked on. He was as great as J.J. Watt was. Joe Thomas was a 4-year starter. Yes. I'd probably put him. As much as I love Ron Dane, I'd still put Joe Thomas above him.
We've had some real good running backs come through. Like I said, Wisconsin offensive linemen and running backs really.
Yep.
They're like Nebraska, sort of. They sort of like a bread and butter team. Great academics. And they want the right person on there. Like, they're not going to get Urban Meyer to come there with all his shenanigans that he's been doing, which would be quite interesting for him to go there. But that ain't going to happen. Just like it's probably not going to go to Nebraska. They're looking for they're more like a family, orientated. We want this, we want that. So it's kind of like they kind of remind me of Nebraska in a way, who also lost their head coach, who also went back to his hometown that didn't work out. So I guess the whole thing is you can never go home again.
You can't compare the two. Paul Chryst had been at it wasn't the first time Paul Chryst was there. He was a quarterback there. And
so Scott Frost.
Well, yes he was, but also Scott Frost wasn't a coordinator at his university. Paul Chryst was. Paul Chryst, prior to becoming a head coach, the guy had been there since 2015. So 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, if you count this year. So we'll call it 6.5 years. He had been there a while. He had also been an offensive coordinator twice over, and also a tight ends and QB coach. And he also coached at Wisconsin again in 2002 under King Alvarez. But he had been there a while. He had loads of success there. He won over 70% of his games there. He had also been a coach of the year twice over. Scott Frost never had a winning season at Nebraska.
That's a disaster.
He looked like an absolute train wreck to the point where he got his own school into trouble. Yeah. And to me, Scott Frost is meant for just Group 5 football. That's just me. But I think well, part of it too is, Scott Frost made the mistake of putting all his eggs on Adrian Martinez, who can't throw the ball down the field, or they won't let him throw the ball down the field. I don't know, but the fact of the matter is, Chris had just a significant amount of success here, and it was hard. You saw Chris McIntosh walk out of the press conference. He looked dead. He looked absolutely worn out announcing that. I'm sure it just wasn't a good day for him because he knows Chris well and likes Chris. And it also was probably frustrating too because Wisconsin just hired an offensive coordinator.
Yeah.
And, Chris was obviously willing to adapt and change because Chris was always willing to do that.
Go ahead.
Everybody has their perceptions on what goes on inside that program. Especially, Badger fans who are just impatient, but Paul Chris was always willing to adapt.
So I think now let's switch from his firing to who replaces him. And I know right now on the interim basis, very popular defensive coordinator, Jim Leonhard, who has been pursued by many different job opportunities. One thing I will say is one of the things that I think is harder for a Wisconsin Badgers coach is the level of academics that the university puts on its players that they have to maintain means it's harder sometimes to recruit a lot of people. So I think we all have to, I think that's part of the whole decision for a coach to come to Wisconsin, that he knows that going forward. Now, obviously, Jim Leonhard, he knows it because he's been in that culture for how long. Obviously, giving him the interim tag is a tryout. Will they then give him the job? What kind of success does he have to get the job? And what other people are there out there? Now, I know one of the names that have been floating around lately is Lance Leipold. He actually coached at my alma mater, started back at UW Wisconsin Whitewater and coached them from 2007 to 2014, took that program up several notches. He's a local guy, so he knows and understands the culture of the Badgers and the academic. He's also said that he's not, he's come out today and he said that he has no plans. Well, of course he doesn't have any plans.
Everybody says that.
He's got a job. He already has a job. Of course he doesn't have any plans. That doesn't mean that it might not change. But anyways, so going from those are two names that I'm going to throw out there that are possibilities, obviously. Let's go back to Eric this time first.
Well, first off, what else is Lance Leipold going to say in that situation? I want the job when you still have 2 months of season left and a potential to take Kansas to a place they've never been before and God knows how long. What else is he going to say there? He still has the guys that he's there. He still has recruits that he's talking to. Mm-hmm. What else was he going to say there? But I think Leonhard will ultimately get the job, and here's why. He's been there he's been there as a player. Probably one of the greatest defensive backs of all time at the University of Wisconsin. I think personally he was second in line if and when Paul Chris retired. I really think they were going to use him because every single offseason, Jim Leonhard is a hot commodity. At one point, Jimbo Fisher wanted him at national champion Florida State. Before they went, I don't remember what they did. I think it might have been Jeremy Pruitt or somebody else at the time, but. Nick Saban, when you're on Nick Saban's radar, you're pretty good at your job. At least you're doing all right. And he probably would have been a head coach considering the athletes that Alabama is able to recruit every single year. And he probably would have he could have had his pick of jobs. I know that he's always attached to rumors to be somebody's head coach somewhere. Even people have named him in the NFL. Because of how good he's been at Wisconsin. I know the Green Bay Packers wanted to make him a coordinator, but he opted to stay. Matt LaFleur went as far as to offer him the job right then and there, knowing what he's done in the state. I think Leonard gets it because, it's going to take, you can't just get anybody you want at Wisconsin. It's not that kind of job. You got to get a guy who gets the culture, who understands the academics, understands how to recruit there. You're not going to get Brian Kelly, who's just complains about Notre Dame's academics, which I think are actually much higher than the University of Wisconsin. You're not going to get that guy because you won't be able to recruit who you want. I know Urban Meyer's, I know Ohio State is not nearly the academic school that Wisconsin is. And, you gotta be realistic here. You got to get a guy who gets it, who knows like what you can work with and what you're able to get. I know for a fact that Lance Leipold would be able to understand that because, he's from Wisconsin. He at the very least knows of what Barry Alvarez did, or at the very least he was in the neighborhood when it was going on. Mm-hmm. But, he built a dynasty at University of Wisconsin Whitewater non-scholarship. So he knows how to do that job. Mm-hmm. Actually, a much more difficult job to get guys who can play and win at the Division III level. So Lance Leipold is an obvious candidate in case Jim Leonard doesn't work out. But I think he will because, number one, he's been ready to be a head coach for a really long time now. He consistently churns out great defense after great defense, no matter who leaves. It's basically a reload. He basically reloads the gun every year, if you will. But, he knows how to lead. I was fortunate enough this past year, before the season, or it was over the summer, I was able to sit down and talk to Bobby Ingram and Chris McIntosh and meet Jim Leonard over breakfast. And, Chris McIntosh was very serious. I actually asked him how the year went without bringing up what Juwan Howard did before Will Smith did it. But he wants greatness. He wants to take it to another level, a level that I don't think Barry Alvarez had the energy for. I really believe that. I think, if you were to promote him, he would probably modernize the offense a little bit. They would still stay true to them and run the ball, no doubt. But I think they would pursue a quarterback harder in the transfer portal and actually pass the ball more, because that's a big reason why Wisconsin's unable to get the quarterbacks that they want, is because they're very much a ground and pound team. But the problem is the Big Ten is no longer a ground and pound conference. Ohio State's been throwing it up there like ducks in hunting season. I know that for a fact that historically, Michigan was very much a ground and pound school under Lloyd Carr. But under Jim Harbaugh, and I guess Brady Hoke and whoever else, they've been throwing it up there like ducks during hunting season. And the college football has changed now. Everybody knows in football the rules favor the offense. They favor the passing attack. That's what makes Jim Leonard so good, is because he's been able to still play great defensive football in spite of the rules being against him. Last year, he had one of the greatest Badger defenses of all time. In terms statistically, it was awesome to watch. Let me tell you, against Iowa during that upset that weekend last year, which I was fortunate enough to go running on the field with everybody, they threw Spencer Petras around like a pinball. He was constantly running. The only time they scored was when Wisconsin had the punt from behind their own end zone and they set him up with short field. Other than that, their offense looked offensive less. But the thing about it, that's what makes Jim Leonard so great. He also gets it. The guy was an NFL player once. He was actually, for what it was worth, considering his size for a 10-year career, that's pretty good. Mm-hmm. And for him, and to the point where he was calling plays on Rex Ryan's vaunted gangrene defense, Rick, if you remember that.
Mm-hmm.
And
yeah,
but Leonard, he knows the culture. You got to get a guy who gets it. You got to get a guy who's at least done a job similar to that. You can't get a guy from LSU because I'm not sure if they even have academics there. And you can't get a guy from, you won't be getting a guy from just any of those Southern schools that are lighting up the scoreboard like no tomorrow. You're not going to get that guy because they won't understand what you have to recruit. They'll think you can just modernize it. They tried that with Gary Anderson, where the program nearly got to that point, but Paul Chris was able to bring it back up to par, which we all should be grateful that Paul Chris came in and saved the day. You can say what you want about the firing right now, but the guy, it's not going to overshadow. The guy only lost one bowl game during his time there, which was a 1-point loss and a missed PI penalty.
Yep, I agree.
So, you need a guy who gets it, and Leipold gets it. Leonard gets it. You have to recruit where the bread is buttered. Guys like Gary Anderson, he never understood that. And yeah, you can establish pipelines, but you have to win your backyard. I mean, local recruiting was shattered before Chris arrived because Gary Anderson had no idea what he had to do in order for it to be there. He just won with Belimo recruits. I think the program would have gone downhill, judging by what happened to his Utah State and Oregon State teams. The Utah State the second time around, and Oregon State that when he got that job where he only lasted 3 years. So, you need a guy who gets it, and Leipold gets it, and Leonard gets it. But I don't really know who else would be able to quote unquote get it.
Okay, Rick, your thoughts?
Well, I agree. I think it's going to be Leonard's job. I think they want to keep it in the family. They want to keep it where a guy gets it. It's, it's a very, they're not going to get a big name head coach there. They're not going to get like a Brian Kelly or an Urban Meyer or something like that. But I think a couple of names that I could think at the top of my head. And I live in North Carolina, and we want him out of here so quick because he's been a disaster. I wouldn't be surprised to hear Matt Rule's name. I think he's gone next season. I'll help Matt pack in Wisconsin. I'll give you some toboggans and some cheese and get you settled in Wisconsin. I'll help you get a roommate if you need to.
That's one way to put it.
Yeah, so I mean, please go away. We don't want you here in Charlotte anymore.
That's actually a good idea.
He's a name that I could think of, and maybe Matt Campbell. I always hear his name mentioned, like maybe a Nebraska or a Wisconsin. He's been a hot ticket. I think with Leopold, I'm going to kind of slow down with him. I think he's kind of like the flavor of the month, and I know he's from Wisconsin. I get it, but it reminds me of Mel Tucker last year. Mel Tucker, oh my God, they signed to his big contract, and Michigan State has been a disaster right now. And so I always like to cool it off. Give him time. He's building something really special in Kansas. I like what he's doing in Kansas. And if he could get that franchise in a couple of years and go to bowl games and do really well, and Wisconsin maybe still kind of struggling with a head coach, I could see him going there. Give him a little bit of time. I think it's a little too soon. I think he's the hot flavor of the month right now. But I think it's Leonard's job, and I think they're going to get him. Unless it's a complete disaster there and he loses all his games and they're just completely blown out, they'll go after somebody. But right now, I think it's going to be Leonard's job.
Well, the thing, too, is if people really want to think about it, Iowa's kind of in the same place as Wisconsin is.
Yeah.
Iowa's offense is actually progressively worse than Wisconsin's. If you want to complain about offense, you look at the nepotism inside that program. As much as great as Kirk Ferentz has been at the University of Iowa, he keeps on hiring people that he's family with, because what's he going to do? Fire them?
Well, they're so behind the times there. I mean, it's an offensive league now, and that's where they change. You need a big name, big arm quarterback, because that's what puts people's butts in the seats are the quarterbacks. They're the superstar. They're the front man. They're the Freddie Mercurys, the Mick Jaggers of sports are the quarterbacks, and they always will be. And Iowa they're just so behind the times right now, and this is how it is.
Spencer Petras was supposed to be that guy.
Yeah.
And also they've had a better string of success with quarterbacks than Wisconsin has in recent years.
Yeah, Wisconsin just needs a quarterback. It's a quarterback league. You need to look at Nick Saban. I mean, he was all defense. And when he saw college football changing, look at their offense, because he adapted. Even though he's a defensive coordinator, he adapted, and they have a high explosive offense.
Well,
and it's all about adapting. You have to adapt.
Even before he became a head coach, Nick Saban, everywhere he's gone for years, has recruited those power blocking offensive linemen. That's been his bread and butter for a very long time. And also, even before college football was throwing up ducks for hunting season, they also had a couple decent quarterbacks there, kind of like a Greg McElroy, which is all Wisconsin would really need to take that next step. So get yourself a Greg McElroy there, and you do all right. Same with an AJ McCarron, maybe another AJ McCarron, maybe.
Yeah. You need like a like not it don't have to be a superstar, but like I don't know, I hate to use this term, you always hear it a lot, like a game manager, just somebody who has got a really high IQ for the game, who's a good quarterback, has a good arm, and makes everyone around him really good. If they could just get that quarterback, not like a superstar quarterback, just a kind of quarterback like that, I think Wisconsin will go far. And I believe Leonard's the man. I mean, I would be, unless it's a mitigating disaster there and he loses every single game, they'll go out and maybe talk to a Matt Rule or a Campbell. But I think it's Leonard's job to lose, to be quite honest.
I think you might be onto something about Matt Rule, because everybody thinks of him at like Baylor, considering he brought that program from the depths of hell.
Oh gosh, yeah, it was awful.
Yeah, considering the ugliness that Art Brill's left there.
Yeah,
and anyway, but he was able to do it and put together a decent program at Temple University. Temple is a very high academic school. You can't be stupid to get into that school.
No.
Which he put together some good teams there, which is why he was so attractive to a lot of different schools. I think, Wisconsin, I think he would understand that, knowing what he had to deal with at Temple, especially in the Northeast, which isn't particularly known for football. You might have to go over to there's only a few schools, really in the Northeast that are really known for football, and like high school wise, because New Jersey, you think of it more as like a soccer and a baseball state. But considering what he was able to do at cash-strapped Temple, at a school that is really not known for athletics. Heck, it was the butt of jokes for the longest time on late night TV.
Mm-hmm.
Even people who graduated there, comedians, would make jokes about it. But I think you might be onto something about Matt Rule. Yes, the NFL is not working for him. Let's be honest. There's very few NFL coaches who could make the NFL work. There's a reason only three of them have won Super Bowl rings.
Yeah.
Pete Carroll left the NFL the first time around after two failed experiences with New England and the Jets. Although the Jets was just awful, and especially including New England. New England, it just was wrong place, wrong time, because they didn't actually want him. He left school and had all that success at USC, and then he went back to the NFL. So we'll keep that in mind. But
yeah,
there's very few. At Barry Switzer, he was basically coaching Jimmy Johnson's team.
Exactly.
So Jimmy Johnson can just give him all the love because he coached them. No, Jimmy, you built that team. The only real coach who had success in the NFL out of college, being a college head coach, was Jimmy Johnson, who that's it. It's hard. It's a much different game.
Yep. You're coaching a bunch of adult millionaires, where in college they're young kids that want to grow, and they're broke college kids. So it's so easy to coach for them. And he's a great college coach, Matt Rule. He's just a terrible NFL coach. He just does the most dumbest, idiotic things out here. They hate him so much out here. It's like you hear "Fire Matt Rule" chants all the time when you go to a Panther game. They've lost like 8 out of their last 9 games. They finally won a home game. Not this Sunday, last Sunday, and it was their first home win in a year. That's how bad he's doing. And they signed him to a 6-year deal. So that's the thing that concerns me, because that buyout going to be huge. He could sit on his behind for a couple of years and not do nothing. He was interested in the Michigan and Notre Dame job too, by the way, when he was still the head coach of the Panthers. So
sounds like a little bit of Bobby Petrino there.
Yeah, he really is.
But I think Matt Rule is absolutely miserable in the NFL. You can just tell. David Tepper is the richest owner in the NFL. He has the most money out of every. I believe he has the most. I think he has the most money out of any owner in the NFL currently.
Yeah, I think the Walton guy is going to pass him now.
Well, yeah, that's because he just bought the team.
Yeah,
and he just bought the team. I think Walton will, just because he just bought the team, and he's gonna inherit a lot.
It's still Tepper right now.
Yeah, Tepper is at the moment. I'm the sale with Walton, is still kind of still going through the thing. They haven't voted on it yet, which they'll more than likely approve it. But I think too, David Tepper knows he screwed up there with Rule, and he
screwed up a lot.
you heard the reports of him saying he's so mad about the contract he gave him. I think Rule would be a good fit at Wisconsin because he gets it. He recruited similar. Actually, he recruited in a much more difficult area in Temple.
Yeah.
He didn't have the luxury that a lot of the other schools in that conference have, like Central Florida, where you can dash the state and you'll find athletes. Same with Cincinnati, which is a well-funded program. But you have guys who can. But yeah, he gets it. He recruited a much difficult area. I think he would be a fit if they were to go down that route. I know, obviously, Leipold we talk about just because of what the dynasty that he built at the University of Wisconsin Whitewater, and the people that he did it without scholarships.
Mm-hmm.
He was able to actually developed a couple NFL players there.
Mm-hmm.
So the fact that he was able to do, he knows the state, he knows what he needs, he knows like what there is to recruit. He knows that you have to hit the backyard hard, and he knows the importance of it. I think that he would be a fit, but I want to see what Jim Leonhard has. Personally, I think he's going to get the job because the players love him. He's very well spoken. I actually was able to listen to him speak. I was fortunate enough this past year to attend a conference, and he was one of the people speaking, along with Bobby Ingram, who I was fortunate enough to have. I was able to share breakfast with him, along with Chris McIntosh. So you're talking about royalty there, I guess. But yeah. I think Leonhard knows how to lead. He lets the players lead, which is something that I think coaches don't do enough of. He lets them kind of take over and figure out their situations, and he intervenes when he has to. I think Wisconsin has a lot going for them, particularly offensively. They got promising young receivers at that spot, and they also have a juggernaut of a running back in Braylon Allen. And I think that ultimately, I think you want to keep Ingram around because here's why: because now he's going to have a little more control of that offense and see. I don't know how they were doing it there or what they were divvying up. But personally, they just hired him, and I think they want to see that through, see what happens. And because I think that would be I think they would be stupid to let Leonhard go because the guy has been on everybody's radar for the past.
He'll get a head coaching job, and there's so many vacancies like Nebraska, Colorado. It's just been like so many firings, this midseason. So Leonhard will get a head coaching job at Wisconsin. They'd be foolish to let him go.
I think overall though they're in a good spot though on it, and I think they're in a good spot. I just think that Chris kind of like anything, heck, Tom Landry was even fired. I think the Steelers nearly fired Chuck Noll, so it happens.
Yeah,
it does. I think the one thing that the Badgers have to be careful of, and they have to make sure that they're 100% that if they don't go with Jim Leonhard, Jim Leonhard's gone, because I have a feeling 100%. That he's there for a defensive coordinator. He obviously wants the head coaching job. If he doesn't do as well as they'd like and they decide to go someplace else, he's gone. So whether we want to keep him, they have to decide, and time will tell. So let's do a quick station identification. So you are listening to the South Florida Tribune on South Florida Tribune YouTube channel. Please subscribe. You can catch more of our broadcasts here. We have many different shows, from Fire Up Wisconsin, Fire Up Michigan, Fire Up Florida, Fire Up Inside the Pigskins on Thursday nights. Typically tonight would be baseball. 108 Stitches baseball talk, but Scott Morganroth is down covering the Miami Marlins right now. So we are replacing that show tonight with the Fire Up Wisconsin. We also have Sports Exchange. You can listen to our shows if you like the audio version on Spreaker, iHeartRadio, Apple, Google, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. You can find written content at www.southfloridatribune.com. And if you have any other ideas that you'd like to see us do on broadcast or on the written side, you can always email us at southfloridatribune@gmail.com. Our Twitter handle, you can follow us, is @TribuneSouth. And if you'd like to advertise or sponsor a show, please call us 954-304-4941. Our last topic. So we talked about the splashes so far, the splash of the Hader trade, the splash of the Christ, the splash of the Packers. Off-season, I would say, would be the Devontae Adams trade. Let's talk about the effects where we think the team is now. They are going into this next week where they actually play in London, which is the first time because the Packers have never been asked, but because they expanded the season, they didn't want to give up. Nobody wanted to give up a game against the Packers because the Packers travel well. They have a good following. So they never wanted to give away a home game because they're sold out for season tickets for years. But when they expanded, so far, when they expanded the games, the number of games per season, they said, okay, you got to go. So this weekend they play the New York Giants, who are a little bit hurt right now at quarterback position.
Yeah.
They play them in London this week. So thoughts about the Packers, how they're doing so far, and this upcoming game. And Rick, you can start this time.
Well, Packers got off to a little shaky start. Aaron Rodgers called out his players to play better, but they have a new team now, pretty much. Devontae Adams left. That was a huge loss for them. But I think they've been playing better. I think LaFleur is a fantastic coach. I think he really gets it. He's just a superstar. He does a lot of great things. I think him and Aaron Rodgers together are a great combination. And these London games, I'm not a fan of these London games. I hate when they play games in London or Mexico. It's an American sport. It always will be, but it is what it is. That's going to be an interesting game because the Giants have really been quite a surprise, even though they have no quarterback, and they have a rookie head coach. And I think Danbo's done a great job with them so far. So it'll be an interesting game, but it'll be interesting if the see Packer fans in London. And I think it's going to be a good game. I think Packers will win. I think Roger will have a big game. Maybe they'll have some tea and crumpets after that. See how it goes. But I think Packers will win. But right now they're playing well. But it's still early. But right now I think they're starting to gel together. And they beat Tom Brady and their Bucks. So we'll see how it goes.
Mr. Eric, your thoughts?
I mean, it's a brand new team. I think Aaron Rodgers somewhat fails to understand that he doesn't have the same guys that he's had. It's basically a brand new receiving corps that's a very young receiving corps that's still kind of learning and still trying to figure it out at that level. And also as far as London goes, I've never liked it because you have to go all the way over there. The body clock is out of whack. The jet lag is horrible. And Roger Goodell likes to flaunt the money bags everywhere he walks, and the fact that, and also Green Bay doesn't like giving up home games because they've been sold out since Vince Lombardi became the head coach, and even during the dark days of the 70s and the 80s they were still they still were at Lambeau Field, but the thing about it too is as far as so far this year, I think Green Bay has kind of gotten lucky. I think they've benefited from the schedule. I think they benefited from the fact that Tom Brady didn't have his full arsenal of receivers. These receivers were banged up and or suspended. So they've kind of benefited in that regard. And they've benefited from New England not having Mac Jones in there, which even so, Bailey Zapp still had that team right in it right until the end. But Aaron Rodgers when you have Aaron Rodgers in the fourth quarter, that's good things tend to happen, which Aaron Rodgers can go win the game by himself. But I think they're benefiting from the schedule they play, because I think personally the NFL wants to see Aaron Rodgers in the Super Bowl, and I think that they're just lucky right now. And personally, I don't think they're because they're going to benefit because of the division they play in. And personally, when Aaron Rodgers gets to the playoffs, I just don't think that team is going to be that team to go to the Super Bowl. When they go up against a playoff caliber team, like let's just say as we look at the standings, for example, when they go up against playoff caliber teams, meaning teams that if you go up against them, if they go up against maybe the Philadelphia Eagles or the Buffalo Bills if they make the Super Bowl. But if we're talking NFC, if you're going up against like playoff caliber teams like maybe the Niners, who have had their number for a long time now, and also the Buccaneers, and maybe if they make a run at it, the Rams. I really don't think that they can match up well against them, because we've seen what Aaron Donald can do, and even if they do, when they do make the playoffs, I don't think they get a home game, because they need that home field in order to be successful. We see what happens to them on the road. We saw it with them in Seattle. We saw what the San Francisco 49ers play 1920s football against them. And then same thing with the Niners, even at Lambeau and all the snow, they still came out and stole a W away in Green Bay and went to the NFC Championship. And even with Tom Brady there, they just, Aaron Rodgers just hasn't been able to get it done. And he had better weapons then. And he had he had like Devontae Adams, and they had, Robert Tonyan was at the top of his game at that point. Alan Lazard was there. They had better weapons. Same with Marquez Valdez-Scantling. They had the weapons, but they still haven't been able to get it done. And with the team with as new as it is, I don't think they can. I think they just benefit because of their schedule.
Well, I think it's going to be interesting, Eric, because all the teams you mentioned the Bills, you mentioned the Eagles, and you mentioned the Rams. We play all of those teams in the regular season this year. So I think it'll be very interesting how we do against them. I think like we've said, we have very young receivers. I think part of the issue, and everybody's going to argue yes or no, Aaron Rodgers does not play in the preseason. Whether that's right or wrong, everybody can, argue or disagree with me. But in a game situation in the NFL, these rookies that have never played in the NFL are now all of a sudden playing with Rodgers. Yes, they practice with him. They but they don't know all the routes. They don't remember all the routes. It's very different. I think this team can go far and when I say if we become a very balanced and not just relying on Aaron, but we have to rely on Dylan and Jones and Aaron Jones. And if part of it is, will our offensive line get healthy and stay healthy to block for the running backs and to protect Aaron? If Aaron's got time, the rookies will be there. I think it's a matter of getting hot, and I don't think they've gotten there yet.
I really think, though, that, they play on Buffalo. Well, Buffalo, it snows there quite a bit, too. Mm-hmm. And Buffalo just looks like a complete team. They have it on defense. Heck, they don't even have Tre'Davious. They lost Micah Hyde recently, but they didn't have any. Tre'Davious White hasn't even played yet. And this team offensively can do wonders. They were about a second away from potentially still being undefeated at this point with what happened in Miami. But you saw what they did to the Rams. They ripped them apart. Mm-hmm. And you saw them this past weekend. Really, the Buffalo, I really think, if the Packers somehow make the Super Bowl, I really think it's Buffalo's year. Buffalo was a Patrick Mahomes explosion away from going to the NFC Championship, which I believe they would have won against the upstart Cincinnati Bengals. But Buffalo knows where it messed up. I mean, Buffalo also knows that, 9.5 times out of 10, no one's going to drive the ball down the field in 13 seconds. That's the second coming of Dan Marino for you. And but it's just like anything though. I mean, Aaron, they got to get it together offensively, because defensively they're not the same. Although they're better at stopping the run than they've ever been. But I think part of that's because no one really runs the ball anymore, and people tend to air it out more. But if Bailey Zappe exposed anything, against the with the Packers defensively, it could get ugly down the stretch.
It could, or they can get hot. You never know.
Yep.
Guys,
Right.
This has been a pleasure. I really had a good time tonight. With that, let's all say, where you guys can be reached. I do not know when the next episode of Fire Up Wisconsin is, but so keep us in tune. Like I said, subscribe to the YouTube channel, sign up for the notifications so If you enjoyed this show, you can enjoy a lot more. I know tomorrow night, tomorrow night's Wednesday night. I would think Sports Exchange will be on. Watch for that. Watch for Inside the Pigskin. I can tell you one last thing before we go. I did a podcast earlier. It's called Three Chicks in a Pod, and we had Melfar Jr. on the broadcast. And one of the questions I asked him after the podcast that we will be talking about on another episode was about playing games in London. And because he's played games in Germany and I believe Japan, he said. He did back when he did it, though, they did it in the preseason. And so it was very different because it was a lot of fun. They did team things around, in the cities and stuff like that. They were able to bring their families over with them. It probably is a little different now with it being during the regular season, but he did say he enjoyed that. So with that, Rick, tell everybody how they can get a hold of you.
You can find me on my website at www.charlottebats.com. We have a petition on there, and hope you can go and sign it because we're trying to bring Major League Baseball to Charlotte, North Carolina. I'm also on Facebook at Charlotte MLB, Charlotte Bats Baseball. I'm on Twitter, Charlotte Bats Baseball. I'm on Instagram at Charlotte Bats. And I'm also on LinkedIn under Rick Curdy. If you have any comments or questions, you can email me at cltbatsbaseball@gmail.com. And we also have a new logo. And I'm getting some apparel that will be coming out soon for our new online store that I'll be launching in the near future.
Awesome. Okay, Mr. Eric Katz, tell us how we can get a hold of you.
You can follow me on Twitter at Sports Team News, where I talk everything sports.
Awesome. And we can find you either here on Fire Up Wisconsin and sometimes on 108 Stitches Baseball Talk. And we'll leave. Eric, what was the Aaron Judge count at now?
62.
62. That's your team, right?
Yep.
Yes, the Yankees.
Yes. Okay. Well, with that, we're going to leave everybody. Thank you for joining us on this episode of Fire Up Wisconsin. Please subscribe to the YouTube channel. Go to our website, www.southfloridatribune.com. Listen to us wherever you get your podcasts. Please subscribe. We hope you enjoyed this. And until the next time, have a great night. Thanks, everybody.
Good night.
Night.